Welcome to Celestial Zodiac, your home for clear and grounded astrology. So far in this progressed chart series, we've explored the progressed Moon, Sun, Mercury, Venus, and Mars. And one thing you may have noticed is that some progressions seem much more noticeable and life-changing than others. Some progressions are deeply felt emotionally. Others describe slow internal growth happening quietly in the background. Some progressions seem to coincide with obvious life chapters and major personal changes, while others barely appear noticeable at all. This often leads to an important question in astrology. Why do some progressions matter more than others? The answer has a lot to do with planetary speed, symbolism, psychological impact, and how closely a progressed planet connects to everyday human experience. Not all planets move at the same speed in progressions, and not all progressed planets affect us equally on a personal level. In this video we'll talk about why planetary speed matters so much in progressions, the difference between emotional timing and structural development, why some progressed planets are strongly felt while others are far more subtle, how astrologers prioritize progressions in chart interpretation, and why progressed outer planets usually matter far less than transits for long-term forecasting. Understanding this helps explain why astrologers tend to focus heavily on certain progressions while paying much less attention to others. One of the biggest reasons some progressions matter more than others is because of how quickly different planets move. In secondary progressions, each day after birth symbolically represents 1 year of life. Because of this, planets that move quickly in the natal chart also move more noticeably in progressions. The progressed Moon, for example, changes signs approximately every 2 to 2.5 years. This creates very noticeable emotional cycles throughout life. People often strongly feel these changes because the Moon governs emotions, instincts, habits, emotional security, and inner needs. The progressed Sun moves much more slowly, changing signs approximately every 30 years. Because of this, progressed Sun changes tend to reflect major identity chapters and long-term personal development rather than shorter emotional phases. Mercury, Venus, and Mars fall somewhere in between. Their progressions often reflect evolving mindset, relationships, values, ambition, confidence, motivation, communication style, and personal priorities over time. The faster a progressed planet moves, the easier it usually is to notice changing phases throughout life. Slower-moving progressed planets often describe deeper structural development that unfolds gradually over many years. Another reason some progressions feel stronger than others is because different planets operate on different psychological levels. The progressed Moon is often considered the most personally felt progression because it reflects emotional timing. It changes what feels emotionally important to us during different phases of life. People often notice progressed Moon changes because emotions are immediate and personal. A progressed Moon entering Cancer may increase emotional sensitivity and family focus, while a progressed Moon entering Sagittarius may suddenly create a stronger desire for freedom, exploration, or expansion. The progressed Sun works differently. Instead of emotional timing, it reflects structural identity development. These changes happen much more slowly and often become noticeable only when looking back over larger periods of life. Mercury, Venus, and Mars often operate somewhere between emotional timing and structural development. They reflect changing mental focus, relationship priorities, personal values, ambition, energy expression, and motivation throughout life. Some progressions feel very internal and psychological, while others seem to show up more clearly through changing life circumstances and experiences. Not every progressed planet creates dramatic or obvious experiences. Astrologers tend to focus most heavily on progressed Moon, Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars angles and important progressed aspects. This is because these factors are closely connected to everyday human experience and personal development. The progressed Moon often feels strongest emotionally because it moves quickly enough for people to clearly experience changing phases throughout life. The progressed Sun often reflects major identity evolution and long-term life direction. Progressed Mercury affects thinking, communication, and perspective. Progressed Venus reflects changing relationship priorities, attraction patterns, values, creativity, and emotional fulfillment. Progressed Mars influences ambition, energy, confidence, discipline, frustration, and motivation. These planets tend to feel personal because they directly influence daily psychological experience and visible life development. Meanwhile, slower-moving progressed planets often remain in the same sign for decades or even an entire lifetime, making them far less noticeable in everyday life. When astrologers analyze progressed charts, they usually prioritize the most dynamic and personally relevant progressions first. Some of the most important progressions astrologers often focus on include progressed moon sign changes, progressed moon house changes, progressed sun sign changes, progressed Mercury, Venus, or Mars changing signs, and progressed planets crossing angles. They also focus on exact progressed aspects to natal planets, progressed stations retrograde or direct, and major progressed lunation phases. These progressions often coincide with major internal shifts, noticeable life chapters, emotional turning points, changing priorities, or important developmental periods. Angular house changes can feel especially powerful because the 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th houses tend to externalize planetary energy much more strongly. For example, a progressed Venus entering the 7th house may strongly emphasize relationships. A progressed Mars entering the 10th house may increase ambition and career focus. A progressed Moon entering the 4th house may create a stronger need for emotional security and home life. Astrologers also pay close attention to exact progressed aspects because these often symbolize key periods of psychological growth and inner development. One of the biggest misconceptions beginners sometimes have is assuming all progressed planets carry equal weight. In reality, progressed outer planets are usually far less important than progressed personal planets. This is mainly because the outer planets move extremely slowly. In secondary progressions, progressed Uranus, progressed Neptune, and progressed Pluto often barely move at all during an entire lifetime. In many charts, these planets may not even change signs through progression. Because of this, they usually do not create the same clearly noticeable developmental cycles that we see with the progressed Moon, Sun, Mercury, Venus, or Mars. That does not mean progressed outer planets are meaningless. In some cases, astrologers may pay attention to exact progressed aspects involving outer planets changing direction, rare sign or house changes, outer planets contacting angles, or important natal planets. But overall, these are usually considered secondary compared to the much more dynamic personal planet progressions. For outer planets, transits tend to matter much more than progressions. For example, a transit from Pluto to your natal Sun, a Neptune transit to your Moon, or a Uranus transit to your ascendant will usually feel far more obvious and externally impactful than the progressed outer planets themselves. This is because outer planets operate more powerfully through long-term transits, collective cycles, psychological transformation, and major life restructuring rather than through secondary progressions. Progressions are not all equal in astrology. Some describe immediate emotional cycles, while others reflect slow structural growth unfolding over decades. The progressed moon often feels strongest emotionally because it moves quickly enough for people to clearly experience changing internal phases throughout life. The progressed sun reflects larger identity chapters and long-term personal evolution. Mercury, Venus, and Mars often describe changing mindset, relationships, values, motivation, confidence, communication, and personal priorities. Meanwhile, the outer planets usually move too slowly in progressions to create highly noticeable developmental shifts on their own. Understanding which progressions matter most helps astrologers focus on the parts of the chart that are most psychologically active and personally relevant during different phases of life. And ultimately, that's what progressions are really describing: the ongoing evolution of the human experience over time. In the next video, we'll continue exploring progressed astrology by looking at progressed aspects and how progressed planets interacting with natal planets can mark important turning points, inner shifts, and developmental milestones throughout life. Thank you for watching Celestial Zodiac. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so you don't miss the next part of this series.